Soft golden light of morning filtered through the cream-colored curtains, casting a warm glow across the bedroom. Isabella stirred, stretching slowly as a faint giggle echoed from the hallway. Before she could open her eyes fully, the door creaked open, and in came little Mia, no more than 6, carrying a tray twice her size. Behind her was Ezekiel, her husband of 9 years, holding Mia steady with one hand and balancing a small bouquet of wildflowers with the other. "Happy birthday, Mommy!" Mia squealed with pride, her hair in uneven pigtails and her dress mismatched but adorable. Isabella's heart melted as she sat up. "You two planned this?" she asked, smiling as Ezekiel leaned in and kissed her cheek. "All her idea," he said, setting the flowers on the nightstand. "I just followed orders." The tray held scrambled eggs, toast shaped like hearts, and a small glass of orange juice, slightly spilled but filled with love. As Isabella looked at her little family, her chest swelled with a quiet joy. Moments like this reminded her why she had stayed through the harder times, when Ezekiel worked late nights and forgot anniversaries, or when silence sat too long between them. "Blow out your birthday wish, Mommy," Mia said, pulling out a tiny cupcake topped with a crooked candle. Isabella closed her eyes, thinking about nothing more than peace, stability, happiness, clarity. She blew gently, watching the smoke curl upward like a silent prayer. Ezekiel sat beside her on the bed, his hand resting on her thigh. "We've got more surprises coming today," he said with a boyish grin. "Dinner reservations. And a little something I think you'll like." Isabella arched a brow, amused. "You? Planning ahead?" He chuckled, raising both hands. "Miracles happen." But beneath her laughter, a whisper of unease stirred, something she couldn't quite name. A flicker, a shadow. Still, she tucked it away, choosing to hold on to the sweetness of the moment. After all, it was her birthday, and she wanted, just for today, to believe that love could still feel this simple. Later that afternoon, after Isabella returned from a quiet walk in the garden while Mia napped, Ezekiel called her into the living room with an excited glint in his eyes. "Close your eyes," he said, holding something behind his back. Isabella chuckled, skeptical but amused. "What are you up to now?" "Just trust me," he said. When she opened her eyes, he was holding a sleek black garment bag. "Happy birthday again," he added with a wink. She unzipped it slowly, revealing a stunning floor-length red dress with sequins that shimmered like sunlight on water. It was unlike anything she usually wore, bold, almost sensual, with a plunging neckline and a slit up one side. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Wow, this is gorgeous," she said, running her fingers over the fabric. But as beautiful as it was, something in her hesitated. It didn't feel like something she would choose. Still, she smiled. "You picked this out yourself?" Ezekiel beamed with pride, stepping behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "The second I saw it, I imagined you in it. I just knew it was meant for you." Isabella met his eyes in the mirror, studying the way his gaze lingered on the dress more than on her. "You're sure it's not too much?" she asked, half laughing. "It's a little dramatic for dinner, isn't it?" He shook his head. "You're always so careful, so modest. Let them stare tonight, Izzy. You deserve to shine." The words were sweet, but something about them felt rehearsed, too polished. Still, she nodded, letting him think he'd impressed her. She held the dress to her chest and turned toward the mirror again, faking excitement. "All right then," she said. "Let's see what kind of night this dress was made for." But deep in the lining of the gown, something scratched her fingers, a tiny snag or thread. She made a mental note to check it later, brushing the thought away like lint. For now, she would pretend the moment was perfect. That evening, Isabella stepped out of their bedroom in the red dress, hair swept up in soft curls, subtle makeup accentuating her eyes. When Ezekiel saw her, his mouth parted slightly, his reaction lingering just a second too long before he whispered, "You're breathtaking." She smiled and kissed his cheek, catching a faint scent on his shirt, one that wasn't hers. "New cologne?" she asked. He paused before nodding. "Got it this morning. Thought I'd try something different." She nodded, pretending not to notice how quickly he moved on. They left Mia with the nanny and drove to a high-end restaurant downtown, one Isabella had never been to before. As they walked in, a few heads turned, not toward her exactly, but toward the dress. A man by the bar squinted, nudged his date, and whispered something that made the woman glance at Isabella and then look away quickly. Isabella caught it. Her stomach tightened, but she said nothing. The maître d' led them to a quiet corner table. As they sat, Ezekiel reached across the table, taking her hand. "You look unforgettable tonight." Isabella gave him a faint smile. "People keep staring. I think this dress is more famous than me." He laughed lightly. "They're just jealous I'm here with you." But she wasn't so sure. Throughout the meal, she felt eyes lingering too long, whispers passed behind half-lifted menus. She tried to shake it off, sipping her wine and forcing her smile. "So, what made you pick this place?" she asked, stabbing her fork into a roasted carrot. "Just wanted to spoil you," he said smoothly. "You deserve to feel like a queen." But as he spoke, he avoided her gaze, focusing on his plate. She watched him, silently chewing. That whisper of doubt she'd felt earlier was now a dull hum in the back of her mind, like a song she didn't know the lyrics to, but couldn't stop hearing. The night ended with a soft kiss on her cheek, and as they drove home, Isabella clutched the hem of the dress, her fingers tracing the faint snag again, now more noticeable under her touch. When they returned home, Mia was fast asleep, curled on the couch in her pink pajamas, thumb in her mouth. Isabella carefully carried her to bed while Ezekiel disappeared into the bathroom. The red dress still clung to her like a second skin, its weight suddenly heavier than it had felt earlier. She slipped out of it and hung it back on the padded hanger, pausing as something unfamiliar caught her nose, a floral perfume, subtle yet distinct, embedded in the fabric. Isabella leaned in closer. It wasn't hers. She had worn a soft vanilla body mist that evening, but this was different, something powdery, mature, and expensive. Her chest tightened. She sniffed again, now certain it didn't belong to her. Her first instinct was to dismiss it. Maybe it came from the boutique, or a store rack. But this wasn't a scent that lingered by accident. It was worn. She tossed the dress on the chair and moved to the bathroom, finding Ezekiel brushing his teeth, humming a low tune. "What cologne did you say you wore again?" she asked casually. He glanced up. "Tom Ford, why?" "Just wondering," she replied. "I smelled something different. Floral." He shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Maybe from the restaurant. Lots of people, tight space." She nodded slowly, studying his reflection. "Yeah, maybe." She didn't press. "Not yet." But that night, as she climbed into bed beside him, the scent still lingered in her nose, an invisible thread pulling at the seams of her mind. When Ezekiel turned to her, she pretended to be asleep, her breathing steady, her heart anything but. As the wind whistled faintly outside their bedroom window, Isabella stared at the ceiling, wondering when a red dress had started to feel like a warning. It was a rainy Saturday when Isabella found herself reaching for the old photo albums stashed in the back of the hallway closet. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a sense of grounding, something familiar to hold on to. Mia was at a sleepover, and the house was unusually quiet. As Isabella flipped through the pages of smiling holidays, candid family picnics, and Mia's first birthdays, she found comfort in the nostalgia. Yet the deeper she went, the more she noticed something unsettling. Ezekiel's presence had started to blur. In earlier photos, he was lively, goofy, playful with Mia. But as the years passed, his smiles thinned, his touches less intimate. Even the way he held her in pictures changed, less hand-holding, more shoulder pats. The warmth was draining from the frames. She paused at a Christmas photo from 3 years ago, remembering how Ezekiel had insisted on using a timer because he didn't want anyone else taking their pictures. She hadn't thought much of it then, but now it felt like control masked as preference. Then there was the last vacation they took. Mia on the beach in her yellow polka dot swimsuit, Isabella under a sun hat, and Ezekiel scrolling his phone in the background. She traced the outline of his distracted posture, heart sinking. She hadn't realized how long it had been since he truly looked at her, not just through her. A wave of guilt rushed over her. Had she missed signs? Had she let life, motherhood, and routine numb her instincts? She closed the album and held it to her chest, eyes burning. Something inside her whispered. He was fading long before the red dress. The house creaked with the weight of silence as Isabella lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazily above her. Beside her, Ezekiel was already asleep, his soft snoring rising and falling in a rhythm that used to comfort her. Now it only amplified her restlessness. She thought of the perfume, the glances at dinner, the distant smiles and old photos. Doubt was no longer a flicker, it was an ember, glowing hot in her chest. She turned over, pulling the blanket tighter, as if it could protect her from what she didn't want to admit. "You're overthinking," she told herself. "You're being paranoid." But the arguments felt hollow. Something had shifted. It wasn't just the dress, it was him. She remembered how he had looked at her that night, not with admiration, but with familiarity, like the way someone looks at a memory. That scared her more than anything. "You don't just buy a dress like that on impulse," she whispered into the dark. Ezekiel stirred but didn't wake. The night stretched longer than usual, and Isabella felt like a ghost in her own life. She thought about asking him directly, demanding the truth, but fear of the answer kept her frozen. What if it shattered everything? What would that mean for Mia, for their home? She pressed her face into the pillow, stifling a sob. Her marriage wasn't broken yet, but something precious had cracked, and she was terrified. It had been happening slowly for years while she'd been too busy surviving to notice. Her tears were quiet, but they soaked the pillow like rain soaking into earth, silent but irreversible. The following morning, as sunlight spilled gently into the living room, Isabella sat on the couch folding laundry while Mia played nearby with her coloring books. The soft buzz of cartoons in the background created a calm lull. Out of nowhere, Mia glanced up and said, "Mommy, why don't you wear the sparkly red dress again?" Isabella blinked, her fingers pausing mid-fold on one of Mia's pajamas. "What dress, sweetheart?" she asked gently. "The one Daddy gave you, the shiny one. Remember, the one Miss Clara had on at the beach." The words landed like a thunderclap. Isabella's hands stilled completely, her heart dropping into her stomach. "Miss Clara?" she echoed, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "When did you see her in a red dress, Mia?" Mia scrunched her nose in thought, kicking her legs as she colored. That time Daddy took me to the beach. Just us. Remember when you were sick and stayed home?" Isabella's mind spun. She had never met a Clara, at least not someone close to her husband. "And who is Miss Clara?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's nice. She gave me ice cream and said I looked like my daddy." Mia giggled, lost in her memory. Isabella tried to breathe, her lungs suddenly tight. "And the dress, it was red." "Uh-huh. Shiny like yours," Mia said, not even glancing up. The living room blurred around Isabella. Her daughter's innocent words weren't just words, they were a window. And through it, she saw something she hadn't been prepared to see, a glimpse of a life unfolding behind her back. She touched her necklace absently, trying to anchor herself. There was no more room for doubt. Mia had unknowingly spoken the beginning of a truth Isabella wasn't ready for. It began with a forgotten lunch. Isabella had prepared Ezekiel's favorite grilled chicken and yam porridge, packed neatly into a container, only for him to rush out the door muttering about an urgent meeting downtown. She called after him, but the front door slammed shut before she could respond. Later that afternoon, while reorganizing the kitchen drawers, she found his lunch still sitting untouched on the counter. A chill ran down her spine. She checked her phone. No messages from him, and her earlier text remained unread. That night, when he returned, he smelled like hotel-grade soap and unfamiliar cologne. "The meeting ran long," he offered, setting down his briefcase. "We had to meet the investors at the lounge in Palm Grove." Isabella nodded but didn't speak. Something about the way he avoided her eyes unnerved her. He used to hug her from behind the moment he walked in. Now, it was as though her presence startled him. Over the next week, the errands multiplied. Ezekiel had networking dinners, team-building weekends, and once, a last-minute conference in another city. Each time, Isabella watched him leave with carefully packed bags and a rehearsed kiss on the forehead. "You've been busy lately," she said one night while folding his travel shirts. "It's good, right?" he replied, not looking up. "All this is for us, for Mia's future." She smiled faintly, wondering when their future had become his favorite excuse. Then came the moment that broke the illusion. She found one of his suit jackets on the back seat of his car, and tucked inside the pocket was a lipstick-stained napkin with the words, "Don't forget Friday, Clara." Her hands trembled as she folded it carefully, like it might shatter if touched too hard. She said nothing to him that night. Instead, she stared at the ceiling long after he drifted to sleep, her thoughts louder than her heartbeat. Whatever had once connected them was unraveling, thread by thread, and it wasn't all in her head. It happened by accident. Isabella was trying to call her sister while driving Mia to school when she accidentally redialed Ezekiel's number instead. Before she could hang up, his voicemail kicked in, but something was off. A faint giggle echoed behind the automated greeting, followed by a woman's voice, sultry and sweet, whispering, "I miss you already." The line went dead. Isabella's fingers tightened around the steering wheel, her vision suddenly tunneling as the world spun in silence. Mia, oblivious in the back seat, hummed to a cartoon tune playing from her tablet. Isabella ended the call, her throat dry, her heartbeat loud in her ears. That voice, it wasn't a recording. It was recent, too recent, and far too intimate to ignore. When she got home, she sat in the car for several minutes, hands clenched on her lap. Her first instinct was denial. Maybe it was old. A prank. But the certainty in the tone, the familiar way the woman spoke, it wasn't a stranger. It was someone who knew Ezekiel deeply. That evening, she watched him more closely than ever. He laughed with Mia at dinner, teased Isabella about her overcooked plantains, even offered to do the dishes. But his eyes never quite met hers. After Mia went to bed, Isabella asked, "Did you get a new voicemail?" Ezekiel looked up from the sink. "Huh, no, why? I just thought I heard something strange." He shrugged. "Must be a glitch. Maybe I hit something while the line was open." He turned away, his shoulders unnaturally tense. Isabella didn't press. She simply nodded, murmured something about being tired, and walked to their bedroom. She knew now. There were things happening outside her line of sight. And worse, he was no longer trying to hide them well. It was late, almost midnight, when Isabella rose from bed, unable to sleep. Ezekiel's phone buzzed on the nightstand, lighting up the dark room. He was in the bathroom, brushing his teeth. A message preview flashed across the screen. "Same scent you loved, still on the red one." Her stomach clenched. She didn't recognize the number, but she didn't need to. The reference was too specific. Her hand hovered over the phone, her instincts screaming. She didn't unlock it. She wasn't ready to cross that line. But as Ezekiel returned and picked up the phone, she watched his eyes flicker. His fingers moved swiftly, deleting something before sliding it into his pocket. "Everything okay?" he asked, feigning calm. "Yeah," she said softly, curling under the duvet. "Just couldn't sleep." He climbed into bed, kissed her forehead. "You worry too much, Izzy. You always do." His words lingered like fog in the room. She didn't reply. As he fell asleep beside her, Isabella stared into the darkness, every nerve on edge. That message wasn't innocent. It was intentional. And it confirmed what her heart had started to suspect. That red dress had a history before it ever touched her skin. The woman's scent, a shared memory. Something intimate that didn't belong to Isabella at all. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she wished she hadn't accepted the gift. It no longer felt like a symbol of love. It felt like borrowed affection. Someone else's story sewn into red seams. Her tears came soundlessly, slipping down her cheeks like a quiet surrender. Something sacred between them had been traded, and she was just now discovering the price. Isabella sat across from Layla at their usual cafe, her fingers wrapped tightly around a mug of herbal tea she hadn't touched. The hum of conversations and clatter of cutlery filled the space, but Isabella's world felt hushed, like a storm gathering in her chest. "He's pulling away, Layla, and I can feel it," she whispered. Layla, never one to sugarcoat things, leaned in. "Izzy, I've watched this happen too many times. Good men don't make their wives feel this unsure, not without reason." Isabella hesitated before telling her about the perfume, the voicemail, the cryptic message. Layla's eyes narrowed. "You need to stop brushing these signs off. That man is hiding something, and you know it." Her voice softened. "You've given him everything, Izzy. Don't let him gaslight you into thinking this is all in your head." Isabella blinked back tears, her voice barely audible. "But if it's true, if he really is doing this," Layla reached for her hand, "then you decide what you want to do with the truth. But pretending it's not there won't make it go away." The truth weighed heavier than ever. She had once believed that love could weather anything, that time, routine, and commitment were enough. But now, those things felt like curtains hiding a rot behind the wall. "Do you know anyone named Clara?" Isabella asked. Layla tilted her head. "Clara? No, why?" Isabella hesitated. "Mia mentioned her. Said Ezekiel took her to the beach with a woman named Clara." Layla's jaw tightened. "You need to find out who she is, Izzy. Because if your daughter remembers her, that woman isn't just a fling." The weight of Layla's words settled like stone on her chest. The time for quiet suspicion was ending. Answers were beginning to claw their way to the surface. The boutique stood on a quiet street corner, dressed in glass and golden signage. Isabella stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming softly. The place smelled of fresh roses and luxury fabric softener. A tall sales associate greeted her with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Elnora's. Looking for anything specific today?" Isabella smiled faintly. "Actually, my husband bought me a red sequin dress from here a few weeks ago. I was just curious if you had more of that design." The associate furrowed her brows. "Do you know the brand or have a picture?" Isabella pulled up a photo from the night of her birthday. The woman examined it closely before glancing back up. "I'm sorry, ma'am, this isn't one of ours. We haven't stocked that design in over a year, maybe longer." Isabella's stomach dropped. "Are you sure?" "He said he got it from here." The associate nodded, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "I actually remember that dress. Vaguely, it was part of a limited line. We only had 3 in stock. One was purchased by a Clara Obianuju, a regular client back then. I remember because she returned it shortly after. Said it was too personal to keep." Isabella stared at her, the floor tilting beneath her feet. "Clara," she repeated, stunned. "That's her full name." The associate nodded. "Yes. I haven't seen her around lately, though." Isabella thanked her and left the boutique, walking like a woman in a dream. The truth was no longer whispering. It was speaking clearly now, loud enough to shake her entire world. The red dress wasn't a gift from love. It was a hand-me-down from betrayal. That night, Isabella sat at the dining table, long after Mia had gone to bed, the room dim except for the soft flicker of a candle beside her untouched tea. Her laptop lay open in front of her, tabs filled with search results, invoices, and bank statements she hadn't looked at in months. The boutique name, Clara Obianuju, and Sunset Beach were typed repeatedly across her screen. She scrolled slowly, eyes scanning for patterns, something to piece together the story she was now certain existed beneath her feet. Then it hit her. An online charge on Ezekiel's card 2 months before her birthday, at a dry cleaner she'd never heard of. She called the number, claiming she wanted to confirm an item had been picked up. "Yes," the clerk said cheerfully. It was a red sequin gown, picked up by Mr. Ezekiel last month. Isabella felt her throat close. She dug deeper, opening their shared cloud storage, something he rarely touched. Folders once filled with invoices and family pictures now contained edited photo albums. One had recently been deleted, but she found it in the trash. Photos of Ezekiel and Mia at the beach. And in one corner of a shot, just barely in frame, was a woman. Tall, elegant, and unmistakably wearing the red dress. Clara. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It had left a trail in receipts, in photographs, in her daughter's innocent memories. Isabella sat back in her chair, the pieces aligning like puzzle edges clicking together. She had always feared betrayal would come in a violent wave. But now she understood it arrived quietly, layered in mundane lies, small evasions, and borrowed dresses passed off as gifts. And what hurt most wasn't the cheating itself, it was how easily he had woven it into the life they shared. How effortlessly he had made her a stranger in her own story. The smell of glue sticks, crayons, and construction paper filled the elementary school hallway as Isabella followed the cheerful chatter of children and teachers. She had nearly forgotten about Art Day, the event Mia had been excited about all week. Despite everything, Isabella made sure to be there, clutching her daughter's favorite snack pack and a quiet hope that the chaos in her head could be set aside for just one afternoon. The classroom buzzed with parents kneeling beside their children, admiring scribbled masterpieces pinned proudly on corkboards. "Mommy!" Mia called, rushing over with pink-stained fingers and a huge grin. "Come see what I made." Her energy was magnetic, and for a brief moment, Isabella allowed herself to smile. Mia led her to a corner of the classroom where several drawings were displayed. Some were typical family stick figures, sunshine skies, flowers, but then Isabella's eyes landed on a drawing that made her stop breathing. It was a beach scene. In it, Mia stood between two tall adults, one unmistakably her father, and the other a dark-haired woman in a red dress. The woman's face was detailed in a way children rarely drew strangers. The figure even wore dangling earrings and red lipstick. "Who's this?" Isabella asked softly, trying not to panic. Mia beamed. "That's Daddy and Miss Clara. She came with us when you were sick, remember?" The words rang loud in Isabella's ears. "You said she gave you ice cream, right?" Mia nodded. "And she let me bury her feet in the sand. Daddy took lots of pictures." Isabella crouched beside the drawing, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the crayon-red dress. The truth had been hanging on a school wall all along, captured by the pure honesty of a child's hand. Isabella waited until they were home, and Mia was napping before she gently removed the drawing from her purse, laying it on the dining table like evidence. She studied it again, really studied it. The lines were crude, but the intention behind them was undeniable. Her daughter had illustrated a memory, not an imagination. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the metadata of the digital photos Ezekiel had uploaded weeks ago. None were tagged with dates from that particular weekend. That made her more suspicious. She opened Mia's school folder and, tucked beneath worksheets, found the drawing dated in pencil. March 4th. Her heart pounded. March 4th was 2 weeks before her birthday, the same weekend Ezekiel had claimed he and Mia went for bonding time. She texted Layla a photo of the drawing and followed up with, "This is what Mia drew. That's the woman I was telling you about." Layla responded almost instantly, "Girl, that's not just a coincidence. You need to get ahead of this." Isabella sat back, staring at the drawing as if it could speak. "Why would he bring her around Mia?" she whispered to herself. Her voice cracked. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity now. It had seeped into their daughter's world. He had involved Mia, made her unknowingly complicit in his deception. It wasn't just emotional carelessness. It was reckless. Infuriating. She clenched her fists against the table. The woman in the red dress was no longer just a suspicion. She was real, named, and drawn with the kind of clarity a 6-year-old only used for someone significant. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a memory Mia had cherished, one Isabella had never been invited into. That night, after Ezekiel returned from working late, Isabella found him in the kitchen pouring himself a drink. She walked in slowly, Mia's drawing folded neatly in her hand. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her tone quiet but firm. Ezekiel glanced up, slightly startled. "Sure. What's on your mind?" She held out the drawing. "Do you recognize this?" His eyes froze on the page, his expression flickering too quickly to be hidden. "It's Mia's," he said carefully. "She made it at school." "And who's the woman?" Isabella asked, watching him like a hawk. He hesitated, then gave a soft chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "Probably a teacher. You know kids. They mix things up." "No," Isabella said, stepping closer. "She said it's Clara, the one who went to the beach with you. While I was sick. Ring a bell." Ezekiel blinked, then scoffed. "Izzy, she's a kid. She makes up stories all the time. You're taking this too seriously." Isabella's hands clenched the paper. "It's not just the picture. It's the boutique. The scent. The messages. This," she lifted the paper slightly, "is just the first thing I can prove." His face darkened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm asking for the truth," she said, voice shaking. "Because our daughter remembers her. And she remembers that dress." The silence between them was thick, almost suffocating. And in that silence, Isabella felt it, the quiet confirmation. He didn't deny it. He didn't defend her. He just walked away, drink in hand, leaving her alone in the kitchen with the drawing still trembling between her fingers. Long after Ezekiel had gone to bed, Isabella remained in the dining room, the soft ticking of the clock her only company. She unfolded Mia's drawing once more, placing it beside her laptop. With a deep breath, she pulled up a calendar app and compared the date Mia had written, March 4th, to her own schedule. That weekend, she had been home with a minor cold, nothing serious enough to warrant a trip to the beach without her. Her hand hovered over the keyboard before typing Clara Obianuju plus beach into the search bar, but nothing concrete came up. Frustrated, she switched to her photo library, scrolling through albums. One folder caught her eye, labeled March Ezekiel and Mia. She opened it and frowned. All the images were indoor shots, generic ones at that. None were time-stamped. None offered location data. It felt deliberately vague, and that made her skin crawl. She switched to Mia's tablet, which was synced to the family's cloud. And there it was, an auto-uploaded photo from March 4th, buried in a folder labeled MISC. It wasn't much, just Mia's sand-covered toes in the foreground, but in the distance, the unmistakable curve of a woman's silhouette sat on a beach towel, wearing red. Isabella zoomed in. Though blurry, the color and form were undeniable. Her hands shook as she stared at the image, her breath caught in her chest. Clara wasn't just a fleeting affair or imagined suspicion. She had been real, present, and photographed. She hadn't just worn the dress first. She had worn it in front of Isabella's daughter. The weight of that realization settled heavily on Isabella's shoulders. This wasn't a theory anymore. The dress was never a gift. It was recycled love, pawned off on a wife who hadn't even realized she was living inside someone else's leftover fairy tale. The next morning, while Ezekiel was in the shower and Mia played with her dolls in the living room, Isabella quietly retrieved his old camera from the storage cabinet. He hadn't used it in over a year, since he'd switched to taking photos on his phone. But Isabella remembered he'd packed it for that beach trip. She powered it on, praying he hadn't cleared the memory card. As the images loaded, her heart sank. There they were, Ezekiel and Mia building a sandcastle, Ezekiel smiling wide beside a woman whose face was mostly turned away, but the details were clear. The same earrings from Mia's drawing, the same flowing red dress, the same arm wrapped around Ezekiel's waist in a pose that only lovers would dare strike. Isabella's stomach twisted. These weren't group photos. These were intimate, taken like souvenirs from a weekend stolen from his real life. Her thumb hovered over the delete button, but she pulled back. She needed this, proof, yes, but more than that, clarity. She scrolled further and found a video. Ezekiel's voice filled the air. "Say hi to Mommy," he said, chuckling. Then Mia's laughter and Clara's voice following with a flirty, "She's going to kill you." The screen went dark. Isabella turned the camera off, her hands clammy. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was documented, preserved like a cherished memory. She placed the camera back in its case and shut the cabinet gently. When she turned, Mia was standing in the doorway, hugging her teddy bear. "Mommy, are you okay?" she asked. Isabella knelt down and opened her arms. "Come here, baby." As Mia nestled against her, Isabella stared blankly into the distance. She had seen the truth, heard the truth, felt the truth, and now she had no choice but to face what came next. That afternoon, Isabella ventured out to the local supermarket to clear her mind, taking Mia along for distraction. The aisles buzzed with familiar neighborhood chatter, children's cries, and the beeping of price scanners. Isabella had just finished checking out when a woman behind her in line tapped her shoulder. "Excuse me," she said with a warm smile. "Sorry to bother, but I have to say you look amazing in that red dress." Isabella blinked. "Oh, thank you. I wore it for my birthday dinner a few weeks ago." The woman nodded, tilting her head. Yes, I thought I recognized it. My friend Clara wore the exact same one to Sunset Beach not too long ago. You two have similar taste." Time stopped. Isabella managed a tight smile and a quiet nod before turning away. Her hands trembled as she grabbed Mia's hand and walked swiftly to the parking lot. "Mommy," Mia asked, confused. "What did the lady say?" Isabella couldn't answer. Her throat burned with rage, but her tears stayed put, frozen behind her eyes. That stranger, someone she didn't know, had just confirmed everything without knowing the weight of her words. Clara had been visible, public, wearing that red dress without shame or secrecy. The same dress Ezekiel had wrapped in tissue paper, handed over with a lie, and called a gift. Sitting behind the wheel, Isabella finally allowed the first tear to fall. Not because of what Clara had done, but because Ezekiel had let someone else live pieces of her life while she stood unknowingly on the sidelines. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. And now, she couldn't unsee it. That night, Isabella sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, the faint buzz of the ceiling fan above her doing little to cool the fire churning inside her chest. The red dress lay beside her, spread out like a wound that refused to heal. She reached for her laptop again, this time with more precision. Her fingers typed Clara Obianuju into every search bar she could think of, Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Most profiles were private, faceless, or clearly not the one she was seeking. Then finally, she stumbled across a barely active Instagram page. The profile photo was unmistakable. Clara, curly black hair, honey-toned skin, piercing brown eyes. The bio simply read, Creative Director, Traveler, Heart First. Isabella clicked the tag tab, heart pounding. Only one photo was visible to the public. A candid shot taken on a beach, sun dipping low behind the waves. Clara sat beneath a striped umbrella, laughing, her legs stretched before her, and there it was. The red dress. Isabella's breath hitched. The caption read, Sunset Healing, March 4th, the same date on Mia's drawing. Her fingers hovered as she clicked the comments. Among the generic hearts and gorgeous emojis, one stood out, a fire emoji from Ezekiel's burner account. A fake one Isabella didn't even know existed until now. The username wasn't his full name, but it was linked to a photo of him holding Mia as a baby. Rage rippled beneath her skin like waves crashing against cliffs. He had made Clara visible to the world while keeping his own wife in the shadows. He had publicly admired another woman while privately claiming love for her. She saved the post, screenshotted everything, and then stared at the red dress lying limp beside her. It was no longer a symbol of celebration. It was a mask, a performance, a costume she'd been handed under false pretenses. She didn't need more proof. She needed answers. From his mouth. From his heart, if anything was still left there. The living room was dimly lit when Isabella finally confronted him. Ezekiel had just returned from another so-called meeting, loosening his tie, whistling low to himself. He didn't notice her sitting there at first, arms folded, laptop beside her, the red dress draped over the arm of the couch. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low, controlled, too steady to be calm. He turned, startled by her tone. "Now. Can it wait till morning?" She stood, holding up the printout of Clara's beach photo. "No, it can't." "Who is she?" He blinked, his jaw tightening. "Izzy, don't do this. You're making something out of nothing." She stepped closer, shoving the picture into his hands. "That's the same dress. The same weekend. The same woman Mia drew. Stop lying." "I know." Ezekiel ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "It was nothing serious. It didn't mean anything. You took our daughter," Isabella hissed. "You let her play with your mistress. You gave me her used dress and wrapped it as love." His silence was a confession. "Clara was a mistake," he muttered. "A distraction. I ended it before your birthday. I didn't want to hurt you." Her laugh was bitter. "You didn't want to hurt me, so you brought her into my daughter's world. So you gifted me what she already wore." Tears streamed down her cheeks, her fists trembling. "You erased me in the most subtle, cruel way possible." Ezekiel's face paled. "I never stopped loving you, Izzy. I swear. But it was too late. Love didn't survive in secrecy. It suffocated in shadows. And she was done living in the dark." The shouting woke Mia. She wandered into the hallway in her unicorn pajamas, clutching her worn-out bunny plush. "Mommy," she called softly, voice fragile. Isabella turned instantly, wiping her face. "Baby, go back to bed, okay?" Mia's eyes searched both their faces, sensing something heavy. "Are you mad at Daddy?" she asked, tears forming. Ezekiel knelt down, arms open, but Mia stepped behind Isabella instead. "You said family means no secrets," Mia whispered. "But you didn't tell Mommy about Miss Clara." Her words shattered the silence. Ezekiel froze, Isabella gasped. Mia wasn't clueless. She'd just been waiting for someone to speak truth. "Who told you that, sweetheart?" Isabella asked gently. "Daddy said it in the car. When we were coming home from the beach." Isabella hugged her tightly, biting back sobs. "I'm so sorry, baby." Mia buried her face into her mother's chest. "I don't want us to be broken." Ezekiel stepped forward again, but Isabella raised her hand. "Enough," she said firmly. "You've involved her in too much already." His eyes filled with guilt, but he didn't argue. "Mia," Isabella whispered, "sometimes people make choices that hurt others, even people we love." Mia looked up confused. "Are you going to leave?" The question struck like lightning. Isabella didn't answer right away. She just held her daughter closer, rocking her gently. I'll never leave you, she promised. But I have to make sure we're safe. And sometimes that means making hard choices. And in that moment, Mia began to cry, not loud, not chaotic, but with the quiet pain of a child learning that love wasn't always safe. It was a wound Isabella would spend years trying to heal. 2 days passed in heavy silence. Ezekiel had moved into the guest room. Mia barely spoke during meals, her questions now replaced with glances too mature for a child her age. Isabella, on edge, found herself clinging to Layla like a lifeline. Over coffee one morning, she told her everything: Clara's full name, the photos, the confrontation. Layla, ever protective, narrowed her eyes and said, I know someone who might know her. Let me do some digging. That afternoon, she called back with news. Izzy, I think I found her. Clara Obianuju, she used to work in PR for a luxury brand. My college roommate, Tolu, interned there last year. They crossed paths. Want me to reach out? Isabella hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I need to hear it from her. No more guessing. Layla didn't wait. She messaged Tolu, who messaged Clara, and within hours, Clara agreed to meet. She said she didn't know you were his wife, Layla told Isabella cautiously. She sounded, rattled. The next day, Clara chose a quiet coffee shop far from the city center. She arrived in a fitted black dress, no makeup, eyes guarded but not defiant. Isabella studied her from across the table, young, elegant, with a softness that felt rehearsed. I didn't come here to scream, Isabella began. I just want the truth, all of it. Clara nodded slowly. Then you'll get it, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Because I think you deserve to know everything he didn't have the courage to say. Clara stared into her cappuccino for a moment before speaking. I met Ezekiel at a business retreat. He said he was separated. Said he was still living with you for Mia's sake, but that the marriage was over. Isabella's throat tightened. He lied from the beginning? Clara nodded. He always talked about you, like a ghost, like someone who once meant everything, but was now just in the way. Isabella clenched her jaw. So when did you realize he wasn't telling the truth? Clara's eyes glistened. When he brought Mia to meet me. She asked if I was going to be her new mommy. That's when I knew. You weren't absent, you were erased. I broke things off after that weekend, Clara continued. I couldn't be part of that kind of betrayal. I returned the dress. I didn't want it. It felt tainted. Isabella listened, the pain in her chest sharp and unforgiving. Did he ask you to keep quiet? Clara hesitated. No. He just pretended like nothing happened. Said you'd never know, that he had it under control. Isabella closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her like acid. You said he talked about me. What did he say? Clara's voice softened. That you used to make him feel alive. That you were the only woman who ever understood him. But he said, you stopped seeing him. That you saw through him instead. Isabella opened her eyes. He's right. I did start seeing through him. I just didn't want to believe what I saw. There was nothing more to ask. The truth had been spoken, and it was even uglier than she imagined. Back home, Isabella entered the bedroom she once shared with Ezekiel. The red dress still hung on the back of the door, untouched since the confrontation. She reached for it, her fingers brushing over the glittering fabric, and in one swift motion, she pulled it down and dropped it to the floor. It collapsed like a body, lifeless, cold, used. She knelt beside it, knees trembling, and let the tears come. Not loud, but guttural. Silent sobs that shook her frame as she pressed the dress to her chest like something that could explain itself if she just held it tightly enough. Her mind replayed Clara's words, Mia's drawing, the voicemail, the message, the pictures, every lie Ezekiel spun into their home, woven into this fabric she once wore with pride. A photo frame crashed as her elbow hit the nightstand. She didn't move to pick it up. The picture inside was of their family, taken at a picnic, smiles wide, Ezekiel holding Mia on his shoulders while Isabella leaned in beside them. She stared at it, the glass cracked like the illusion it once represented. She whispered into the silence, You broke more than vows, Ezekiel. You broke me in places I didn't know could crack. She reached under the bed and pulled out a shoebox she hadn't touched in years. Inside were love letters, anniversary cards, their wedding vows scribbled on hotel stationery. One by one she read them, her tears falling freely now. When she was done, she placed the red dress in the box, folded it neatly, and closed the lid. She wasn't ready to burn it, not yet. But she couldn't leave it hanging like a trophy of deception either. Her heart was bruised, but her spirit stirred. The pieces were on the floor, but they were hers to gather now. That night, after Mia had gone to sleep and the house was blanketed in silence, Isabella sat by her vanity with an empty notebook and a pen. She couldn't talk to Ezekiel anymore, not with honesty. So she began writing letters she never intended to send. The first began with, "Dear me." It wasn't about him or Clara or even the dress. It was about her. Her dreams before marriage, her laughter before the silences, her desires that had long been buried under the weight of being everything for everyone else. She wrote about the girl who once painted in the afternoon sun, who danced in her kitchen barefoot to music no one else heard. "Where did she go?" she asked on paper. "Why did you let her disappear so quietly?" She filled 3 pages before her tears blurred the ink. Then she started another letter, this one to Mia. Not to explain the betrayal, but to promise healing. "I will show you what strength looks like. Not through anger, but through becoming whole again." Each sentence came with a mix of grief and freedom. She folded the letters and tucked them into a journal she hadn't touched in years. That journal had once been filled with love poems for Ezekiel. Now it would hold something more sacred, truths she owed to herself. She looked at her reflection in the mirror afterward and saw a woman who had carried pain gracefully, but no longer had to carry it alone. The letters weren't closure. They were a beginning. For the first time in weeks, Isabella exhaled without breaking. There was a long road ahead, but she had just taken the first real step. The next morning, Isabella stood outside a law office in a quiet part of town. The decision hadn't come in an explosive moment. It had unfolded slowly, like the final page of a long chapter she could no longer reread. Her fingers trembled as she signed in at the reception desk. "I'm here to consult on a separation," she told the receptionist, who nodded gently. In the private meeting room, the attorney, a soft-spoken woman named Ms. Okafor, listened carefully as Isabella laid out the situation. "There was no physical abuse," she explained, "but the emotional betrayal. It's deep. It involved our child. I don't want revenge. I want peace." Ms. Okafor nodded. "You don't need permission to choose your peace. We'll take it one step at a time." Later that afternoon, Isabella returned home to find Ezekiel in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone, pretending the silence wasn't tearing the house apart. "We need to talk," she said calmly. He looked up wary. "I met with a lawyer today." His face fell. "So that's it?" he asked, as though he hadn't authored every reason she had to walk away. "I begged you to talk to me. You chose to lie again and again. I gave you space to come clean. You filled it with someone else." Ezekiel leaned against the counter, defeated. "You really won't forgive me?" Isabella shook her head. "It's not about forgiveness. It's about what I can't unsee. I deserve to feel safe again in my home, in my heart, in front of my daughter." She left him in the kitchen, stunned into silence, as the sound of her footsteps echoed like resolve across the tiled floor. The apartment was small, modest, and sparsely furnished, but it was hers. The walls were bare, the kitchen echoed when they spoke, and Mia's room was barely more than a converted study. But it felt different. It felt light. Isabella placed the final box on the kitchen counter and looked around, heart full of a strange, bittersweet clarity. Mia came running out of her room, holding a picture she'd drawn of the two of them under a tree. "Look, Mommy, it's us in our new house." Isabella smiled and pulled her into a hug. "Do you like it here?" she asked. Mia nodded. "It's quiet, and you're smiling more." The innocence in her voice made Isabella tear up, but this time it wasn't from sorrow. It was from a peace she hadn't known in years. That evening, they shared dinner on the floor, jollof rice in paper bowls, surrounded by unpacked boxes. Isabella lit a candle and said, "To new beginnings." Mia raised her cup of juice, and no more secrets. They clinked. As the night fell, Isabella sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching her daughter sleep through the open bedroom door. The city hummed gently below, and for once her world wasn't built on illusion. She wasn't sure what the future held. There would be custody meetings, painful conversations, lonely nights, but she had stepped out of the storm. She had chosen herself, not in spite of her child, but because of her. And in that quiet, with only the moon bearing witness, Isabella felt something soft bloom inside her again. Not happiness yet, but something like hope. It was a gray Sunday afternoon when Ezekiel showed up at the apartment. He didn't call ahead, just knocked, hands tucked into his jacket pockets like he was bracing for wind. Isabella opened the door slowly, unsure what to expect. His eyes scanned the modest space behind her, and he offered a soft smile. "You did all this yourself?" She nodded. "It's not much, but it's enough." He stepped inside hesitantly. Mia wasn't home. Layla had taken her out for the day, and Isabella had planned to use the quiet time to rest. But maybe some goodbyes were meant for quiet days. "I wanted to return this," he said, pulling a small silver frame from his bag. It was their wedding photo, cracked from when it had fallen weeks earlier. He had taped it. "I didn't want to throw it away," he added. Isabella took it gently, unsure what to say. The picture looked like strangers now. They sat across from each other at the tiny dining table. The silence between them was no longer angry. It was tired. Ezekiel's voice broke first. "I've been thinking about everything. What I did. What I ruined." She looked at him, not with hatred, but with resignation. "You didn't just hurt me," she said quietly. "You rewrote our daughter's idea of love before she even understood what it meant." He lowered his head. "I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." He paused. "I'm not here to beg. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not to fix anything, but because it's the least you deserve." Isabella nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. As he stood to leave, he lingered at the door. "You were the best part of my life, Izzy. I wish I'd treated you like it." She didn't respond. Instead, she walked him out and closed the door softly behind him. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something was ending. It felt like something was finally over. The sun was setting in streaks of amber and rose when Isabella opened the storage box one last time. The red dress lay neatly folded inside, still glimmering faintly like it had the night she first wore it. But it no longer held power over her. It no longer hummed with questions, pain, or deception. It was just fabric now, used, worn, and irrelevant to who she was becoming. She placed it carefully into a brown paper bag, along with a few of the old letters, and walked to the community donation bin 3 blocks away. Each step felt lighter than the last. At the bin, she paused briefly, looking down at the dress one final time. "Thank you for showing me what I didn't want to see," she murmured. Then she dropped the bag in and walked away without looking back. Back at the apartment, Mia was coloring at the table when Isabella returned. "Where'd you go, Mommy?" she asked. Isabella sat beside her and smiled. "I let go of something I didn't need anymore." Mia tilted her head. "Like cleaning out your closet?" Isabella laughed softly. "Exactly like that." She watched her daughter scribble hearts and stars with crayons, and felt an unfamiliar stillness settle in her chest, not emptiness, but space. Room for new beginnings, new memories. She stood and walked to the window, pulling it open to let in the early evening breeze. It brushed against her skin like blessing. Life hadn't gone the way she'd planned, but it was hers again. No longer hidden behind another woman's perfume, or buried beneath a mountain of polite silence. Isabella had chosen herself. And in the simple sound of her daughter humming, in the soft rattle of the wind chimes by the window, she finally heard peace. Not loud, but whole. Here's the Bible verse for the story, Luke 8, verse 17. "For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open." This verse perfectly mirrors the heart of Isabella's journey, the slow unveiling of truth, the consequences of secrecy, and the eventual emergence of clarity. What was hidden in darkness was inevitably brought into light, and while the revelation was painful, it also set her free. Moral of the story: no matter how beautifully a lie is wrapped, truth has a way of unwrapping itself. Real love cannot be built on borrowed pieces, and healing begins the moment we choose honesty over illusion, even if it means starting over. This moral speaks to the emotional core of the story. Deception may last for a while, but it always carries consequences. True peace only arrives when we stop clinging to what's breaking us and begin choosing ourselves with courage and grace. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like And don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.